The days seemed to pass in a blur of happiness, love, and quiet contentment. Clara had come a long way since the first day she stepped off the plane and into Eli's world. She had been unsure of herself, filled with doubts about fitting in, about whether she could truly be accepted and loved. But now, sitting beside Eli on their front porch, watching the sunset over the distant hills, Clara felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. She had started to believe that love wasn't about perfection or meeting other people's expectations. It wasn't about fitting into a mold that others had made for her. It was about finding someone who saw her for who she truly was, her heart, her soul, her kindness. And Eli saw that in her every single day. They spent their mornings together walking through the forest that Eli knew so well, talking about everything and nothing. Their conversations had shifted from cautious, uncertain exchanges to deep, meaningful discussions about their hopes for the future. Clara had started to dream again, to think about what kind of life she could build here in this small, quiet town with Eli by her side. There were still moments when Clara felt the sting of doubt. She had spent so much of her life trying to live up to the standards of others that it wasn't easy to simply let go of those fears. But with each passing day, as she felt Eli's love grow stronger, those fears slowly faded. She began to understand that her worth wasn't determined by the opinions of others. It was defined by the love she gave, the kindness she shared, and the way she allowed herself to be loved in return. One evening after dinner, Eli surprised Clara with something she hadn't expected. He had always been straightforward and practical, but tonight there was something different in the air. As they sat together by the fireplace, Eli took her hand and looked at her with a seriousness that caught her attention. "Clara," he began, his voice calm and steady, "I've been thinking about us a lot lately, about everything we've been through and how far we've come." Clara looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. She had always known how deeply Eli cared for her, but tonight his words felt heavier, as though they carried a deeper meaning. "I know it hasn't always been easy," Eli continued, his gaze soft but firm. "There have been moments of doubt, moments when we didn't know if we'd make it through, but I've never once doubted that you're the one I want by my side. I've never doubted that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Clara's breath caught in her throat, and she could feel the warmth of emotion spread through her chest. She had always known that Eli was different, that their connection was something special. But hearing him speak those words made her heart swell with happiness. "I love you, Clara," he said, his voice full of emotion, "and I want to build a life with you. A life where we can both be ourselves, where we don't have to worry about fitting into anyone else's idea of who we should be. Just us together, living the way we want to." Clara's eyes filled with tears and she could hardly speak. The love she felt for Eli was overwhelming, and hearing him express his feelings made her realize just how much she had longed for this. To be loved for who she was, without conditions or expectations. "I love you too." "Eli?" Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone." Eli smiled and took a deep breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple box. Clara's heart skipped a beat as he opened it to reveal a beautiful silver ring. It wasn't extravagant, but to Clara, it was perfect. It was a symbol of the life they had built together and the future they would share. "Clara," Eli said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion, "will you marry me? Will you make me the happiest man in the world and spend the rest of your life with me?" Tears filled Clara's eyes as she looked at him. For so long she had doubted herself, doubted that she was worthy of this kind of love. But sitting here with Eli, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the world they had created together, she knew she had found something truly special. It wasn't about her size or the way she looked. It was about the connection they shared, the love that had grown between them despite the challenges. "Yes, Eli," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I'll marry you." Eli's face lit up with joy and he carefully slid the ring onto Clara's finger. She felt a rush of happiness flood through her, and in that moment she knew that everything had changed. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was someone's partner, someone's equal, someone who was loved unconditionally. Their life together wasn't going to be perfect. There would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and obstacles to overcome. But they would face those challenges together, hand in hand, just as they had done from the very beginning. Over the next few months, Clara and Eli planned their wedding. They chose a small, intimate ceremony in the forest, surrounded by the towering trees that had always been Eli's home. It was a simple affair, but to Clara it was everything she had ever dreamed of. The people who had once judged her were there to witness the love she and Eli shared, and although there were still whispers and sideways glances, Clara stood tall, knowing that the love she had with Eli was more than enough. On the day of their wedding, Clara stood in a simple white dress, the sun shining down through the trees. Eli stood beside her, looking at her with love and admiration. As they exchanged vows, Clara felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She had finally found the love she had always wanted, the love she deserved. The ceremony was small but meaningful, and when they exchanged rings, Clara knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful life together, a life filled with love, respect, and the kind of happiness that she had always dreamed of but never thought possible. After the ceremony, Clara and Eli walked hand in hand through the forest, just as they had done so many times before. This time, however, there was something different. They were not just two people wandering through life. They were a couple bound by love, ready to face whatever came their way. "I'm so happy," Clara said softly, looking at Eli with a smile that reached all the way to her heart. "I never thought I could be this happy." Eli squeezed her hand, his smile as warm as ever. "This is just the beginning, Clara," he said. "We have a lifetime ahead of us, and I'm excited to spend every moment of it with you." And with that, they walked into their future, ready to face whatever came next, together. After several wonderful days together, the reality of Clara's new life began to settle in. She had traveled across the world to be with Eli, and everything felt like a dream. The small, quiet town he lived in was so different from her bustling village back home. It was peaceful and beautiful, with tall trees surrounding their cabin and the sounds of nature filling the air. Clara had never imagined that she would live this kind of life. Yet here she was, surrounded by the serenity that Eli had always known, and she was beginning to feel more at home with each passing day. But even in this beautiful new world, Clara couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't entirely right. She had always been the kind of person who cared about what others thought. In her small village, people had always judged her because of her size, and though she had tried to ignore it, the old feelings of insecurity had never completely disappeared. Now, as she stood in Eli's world, she wondered if the people in his town would be as accepting as he had been. Would they understand her? Or would they judge her too? Eli had introduced her to his friends and neighbors, and while most of them were warm and welcoming, there were some who made Clara feel out of place. At one of the community gatherings, Clara overheard a group of women talking about her. They didn't know she could hear them, but their words reached her ears, and Clara couldn't help but feel her heart sink. "She's so much bigger than I thought," one woman whispered. "Do you think she'll be able to keep up with Eli's work? He's a lumberjack, after all. It's hard work," another woman nodded. "I don't know. She's not exactly what I expected. I hope she's ready for this life." Clara felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She had been trying so hard to fit in, to be accepted in this new world, but now she wondered if she ever would. The judgment she had feared all her life was starting to creep in again, and she felt the familiar sting of being seen as less than. When she told Eli about what had happened, he was immediately upset. "Clara, you don't have to listen to them," he said, his voice firm. "They don't know you the way I do. They don't see the heart, the strength, the kindness that I see in you." But Clara couldn't help the doubt that had begun to settle in her heart. Eli had always been kind and loving, but the people in his town had known him for years. They had their own way of seeing the world, and Clara was an outsider trying to fit in. What if they never accepted her? What if she was always going to be seen as the odd one out? For the next few days, Clara kept to herself more. She spent a lot of time walking around the woods near Eli's cabin, trying to clear her mind. She loved the quiet beauty of the forest, and being surrounded by nature made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. The tall trees, the rustling leaves, and the chirping birds calmed her, and for a while she felt at peace again. But even in the silence of the forest, her insecurities followed her. Eli could see the change in Clara. He noticed how she became more withdrawn, how she avoided certain situations. He knew she had always struggled with self-esteem, but now it seemed like the weight of other people's opinions was starting to affect her again. He hated seeing her like this. He loved Clara for who she was, not for her size or what others thought of her. But he also knew that her journey to self-acceptance was far from easy. He wanted to help, but he wasn't sure how. One afternoon, Eli took Clara out on a long walk in the woods, away from the town and the judgmental whispers. They walked side by side in silence until they reached a quiet clearing where they could sit and take in the view. Eli sat down on a large rock and patted the space beside him. Clara hesitated at first, but eventually joined him, sitting down with her legs crossed. For a moment, they just sat there, listening to the sounds of the forest. The wind whispered through the trees and the air was fresh and clean. Eli broke the silence. "I can't stand seeing you like this," he said softly, his voice full of concern. "You're so strong, Clara. You're the most incredible woman I know. But I can see that the people's opinions are getting to you, and I don't want that to happen." Clara looked down at the ground, unsure of what to say. She felt vulnerable, exposed. "I'm just scared, Eli," she confessed. "Scared that no matter how hard I try, I'll never really fit in. Scared that I'll always be the one people look at and judge. I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm not enough." Eli reached out and gently took her hand in his. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said, his voice steady. "You are enough, Clara, more than enough. I know what kind of woman you are. You're kind, you're brave, and you're so much more than your appearance. Don't let anyone, not even me, make you feel less than you are." Clara looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. She had always admired Eli's strength and confidence, but she had never been able to fully believe that she too could be strong. She had spent so much of her life trying to meet other people's expectations that she had forgotten to see herself the way Eli saw her. "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "But it's hard when the world tells you something different." Eli squeezed her hand and smiled at her. "I know it's hard, but you don't have to listen to the world. You don't have to live by their rules. What matters is what we see in each other and what you see in yourself. You are exactly who you're meant to be." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Eli's words were like a lifeline, pulling her from the depths of doubt. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, and there would still be moments when she would doubt herself. But she also knew that she wasn't alone. Eli believed in her, and that belief was starting to help her believe in herself. As the days passed, Clara began to open up more. She took the time to talk with Eli's friends and neighbors to share her story and her experiences. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when she felt the sting of judgment. But with each conversation, Clara grew stronger. She learned to stand tall, to be proud of who she was, and to embrace the life she had built with Eli. The whispers of doubt and judgment didn't disappear overnight, but Clara began to understand something important, or their opinions didn't define her. She wasn't there to fit into their mold. She was there to live her life the way she wanted to, with the man she loved in a place where she could be free to be herself, and that was more than enough. The day Clara had been waiting for had finally arrived. She stood by the window in her small, modest house, staring out at the road as the wind rustled the leaves outside. Her heart was racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The plane tickets had already been booked and the date was set. Eli was coming. After months of exchanging letters, sharing their hopes, fears, and dreams, they were finally going to meet in person. Clara could hardly believe it. She had been dreaming about this moment for so long, and now it was just a few days away. She stood there, lost in thought, wondering what he would be like. In his letters, Eli had seemed so genuine, so kind. He had told her stories about his life in the woods, about the peacefulness he found in the trees, and about the simple joys he cherished. But what if the person she had imagined in her mind was different from the man who would actually step off the plane? She had heard so many stories of people meeting online, only to find that the real-life connection wasn't the same as what they had hoped for. What if Eli wasn't what she expected? Shaking off the doubts, Clara focused on the excitement she was feeling. After all, they had spent so many months getting to know each other. They had shared laughter, worries, and even small, everyday moments. She had come to trust him, to believe in the bond they had built, even though it had been formed through letters and distance. But now they would meet face to face. It felt unreal. When the day finally came, Clara found herself standing at the airport, waiting anxiously for Eli to arrive. Her heart felt as though it might leap out of her chest. The terminal was busy with people rushing to catch their flights, but all Clara could think about was Eli. She kept checking her watch, feeling the minutes stretch into what seemed like hours. And then finally the moment came. She saw him. Eli was taller than she had imagined, with broad shoulders that looked even larger in person. His face was strong, with kind eyes that seemed to smile even before he did. He was wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. Nothing fancy, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made Clara's heart flutter. He wasn't just any man. He was the man she had been waiting for. The man who had written to her with such warmth. The man who had shared his life with her in a way that made her feel seen and understood. He was real, and he was here. Clara's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met. There was an instant connection, a recognition, as though they had known each other for a lifetime. Eli's face lit up with a smile, and without saying a word, he walked toward her. Clara felt like she was in a dream, unsure of whether this was really happening or not. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. And then Eli was standing right in front of her, his arms open as if to embrace her. Clara didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and they embraced for the first time. It wasn't the awkward, uncertain hug she had imagined. It was warm, comfortable, and familiar, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "I'm so glad to finally meet you, Clara," Eli said softly, his voice deep and warm. Clara looked up at him, her heart beating faster. She couldn't believe how real it all felt. They had talked about this moment so many times in their letters, but now that it was here, it was even better than she had imagined. "I'm glad too," Clara replied, her voice shaking with emotion. She had been so afraid that this moment wouldn't live up to her hopes, but now, standing here with Eli, she knew it was everything she had dreamed of and more. They spent the rest of the day together, walking through the city, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. It felt as though they had known each other for years, as if they were picking up right where their letters had left off. They shared stories, laughed together, and for the first time Clara could truly feel the connection they had built. It wasn't just words on paper anymore. It was real. As the day came to a close, they sat on a bench in the park, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Eli turned to Clara, his expression serious for a moment. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low. "I've been waiting for this for a long time." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Me too," she said. "I didn't know what to expect, but now that we're together, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Eli reached out and took her hand, holding it gently but firmly. Clara looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, she felt completely at ease. All the doubts, all the fears she had carried with her melted away in that moment. She had found someone who truly saw her, who valued her for who she was. It didn't matter what size she was or where she came from. All that mattered was the connection they shared. The next few days passed in a blur of happiness. Clara and Eli explored the city, took long walks in the countryside, and spent quiet moments talking about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. Clara was amazed at how easy it was to be with him. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversations. It was as though they had known each other their entire lives. But as much as Clara loved the time they were spending together, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she needed to confront. She had spent so many months writing to Eli, pouring her heart into her letters, but she still hadn't fully opened up to him about the one thing that had always held her back, her insecurities about her size. She had tried to ignore it, to pretend it didn't matter, but deep down, Clara knew that it was something she had to talk about. One evening, as they sat on a quiet street bench, Clara turned to Eli, her heart pounding. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice quiet. Eli looked at her, his expression full of concern. "What is it, Clara?" he asked gently. Clara took a deep breath, her fingers nervously twisting together. "I've always felt like my size holds me back," she said, her voice shaking a little. "I know I'm not the picture of what most people would consider beautiful. And I've always been afraid that someone might not love me because of that." Eli looked at her for a long moment, his gaze soft and understanding. "Clara," he said finally, "I've seen you for who you are from the very first letter. Your heart, your soul, the way you care about others. That's what I love about you. It's not your size, it's you. I've never thought of you as anything other than beautiful, inside and out." Clara felt a rush of emotion flood over her, her heart swelling with happiness. She had feared this moment, worried that her insecurities would come between them. But Eli's words were like a balm to her soul, healing the wounds of rejection and self-doubt she had carried for so long. She smiled, feeling more at peace than she ever had. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. I needed to hear that. Eli squeezed her hand and smiled back. I'm glad you told me. I want you to feel safe with me, to always be able to speak your heart. And in that moment, Clara knew that this was just the beginning. The journey they had started with letters was now becoming something real, something full of promise. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was someone's love, someone's equal, someone who deserved all the happiness she had dreamed of. And with Eli by her side, she knew that anything was possible. Clara stared at the letter in her hands, her heart racing. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone had written to her without focusing on her size. Eli's words were different from all the others. He didn't comment on her appearance or tell her what he was looking for in a woman. Instead, he shared pieces of his life, his interests, and his values. It was as if he was speaking directly to her, as if he truly wanted to know who she was. The first few sentences caught her attention. Eli spoke about his love for the outdoors, how much he enjoyed spending time in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. He described his work as a lumberjack, how he found peace in the hard physical labor and the beauty of nature. There was something so genuine in his letter. It was as though he wasn't trying to impress her with his words, but instead simply sharing his life with her, hoping she would connect with it. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She read the letter again, slowly this time, as if each word carried more meaning than the last. Eli seemed different. His letter didn't feel like a typical letter from a stranger trying to judge her. It felt like a real person was reaching out, hoping for something honest, something real. For the first time, Clara felt seen for who she truly was. She took a deep breath. She had been waiting for a moment like this and for someone to truly understand her, to value her not for her size but for her heart and soul. Eli wasn't asking her to change, and he wasn't making her feel like she needed to be something she wasn't. Clara knew this could be the beginning of something special. For a moment, Clara hesitated. Could she trust this feeling? After all, so many men had disappointed her in the past. What if Eli was just another man looking for someone to fit into a mold? But something in her gut told her that Eli was different. His sincerity felt real, like he wasn't playing a game or trying to impress her with empty words. She felt an undeniable pull to write back. Without wasting another moment, Clara sat down at her desk, grabbed a pen, and began writing. She told Eli about herself, about her life in Eastern Europe, about her dreams, her struggles, and the quiet hope she carried in her heart. She spoke honestly, without the fear of being judged. She shared things she had never shared with anyone before, because for the first time she felt she didn't need to hide who she was. As she wrote, Clara couldn't help but smile. She was writing to someone who saw her for more than just her appearance, someone who valued her for who she truly was. She poured her heart into the letter, describing her love for books, the quiet walks through the village, and the hope that one day she could experience life in a way that was completely different from the one she had known. She told him how much she loved the idea of adventure, and how she dreamed of finding someone who could see her beyond the surface. When she finished writing, Clara carefully folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. She took a deep breath and felt a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. There was something about Eli that made her feel hopeful, and for the first time in months, Clara felt like there was a chance for something good to happen. Sending the letter was like releasing a small part of her soul into the world. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to take a chance. After all the rejections, all the pain, and all the self-doubt, she finally felt like she was doing something that could lead her toward happiness. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Days passed, and Clara tried not to think too much about the letter. She went about her life as usual, but every now and then her mind would wander back to Eli. She wondered if he would respond, if he would still be interested after reading her letter. What if he decided she wasn't the right match for him? She tried to push the doubts aside, but they lingered in the back of her mind. Then, after what felt like an eternity, another letter arrived. Clara's heart skipped a beat when she saw it. It was from Eli. She held the envelope in her hands, a mix of excitement and nervousness rushing through her. She quickly tore it open, her hands trembling slightly. Eli's letter was even more personal than the first. He spoke about his life in the Pacific Northwest, about the challenges and rewards of being a lumberjack. He talked about the solitude of his work, how he spent most of his days in the forest surrounded by trees and the quiet hum of nature. Clara could sense the peace in his words, the way he had found fulfillment in the simple things that many people overlooked. Eli also wrote about his hopes for the future. He admitted that he was tired of being alone and that he had been searching for someone who shared his values and his desire for a meaningful life. He mentioned that he wasn't interested in the superficial things that others often focused on. He wanted someone real, someone who could understand the importance of hard work, honesty, and true companionship. He told Clara that he had a strong feeling that she might be the one he had been searching for. As Clara read his words, her heart swelled with emotion. For the first time, she felt a connection that went beyond the surface. Eli wasn't just interested in her because of how she looked. He was interested in her because of who she was as a person. The idea that someone, especially someone so far away, could see her in this way made her feel cherished, valued, and loved in a way she hadn't thought possible. Clara took a moment to absorb the letter. She realized that this was no longer just a simple exchange of letters. Something deeper was beginning to unfold. Eli wasn't just a man from another country. He was becoming a part of her life, someone she could picture sharing her dreams and hopes with. And as she sat there, holding his letter in her hands, Clara made a decision. She would keep this connection alive. She would continue to write to him, to share her thoughts, her dreams, and her fears. She knew that what she was feeling was something special, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. From that moment on, Clara and Eli's letters became a daily part of her life. Every time she opened one of his letters, she felt like she was learning more about him, about the man he was, and about the life they could one day share. It wasn't just about finding love anymore. It was about finding a true partner, someone who would see her for all that she was and love her for it. As weeks passed, Clara grew more and more excited about the possibility of meeting Eli in person. She began to imagine what it would be like to stand beside him in the forest, to hear the sound of the trees and the birds, and to share a life built on mutual respect and love. The idea of a new life, one filled with adventure and partnership, seemed more real with each passing day. Clara had always dreamed of something more. She was born and raised in a small town in Eastern Europe, a place where the people were close-knit, and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. Her family was kind and loving, but there was always an underlying tension. They didn't have much money, and Clara often saw how hard her parents worked just to get by. There was never any room for luxuries or fun. Clara, like many others in her village, was expected to settle down early. In her community, it was common for young women to marry in their early 20s. They would often stay home to take care of the household and raise children. It was a well-worn path, one that Clara had seen many of her friends follow. But Clara didn't want that. She had bigger dreams. She wanted to experience the world, to see places beyond the small village that had always felt like it was closing in around her. She longed for a life full of adventure, love, and freedom, but that kind of life seemed impossible in her small rural town. Clara was a bit different from the other girls in her town. She wasn't as slim as most of the women who were considered the ideal beauty in her community. In fact, Clara was fuller-figured, with a rounded face and curves that were often seen as less than perfect by the standards of beauty her village valued. She didn't mind the way she looked, but sometimes she couldn't help feeling like she didn't quite fit in with the other women around her. People would often make comments about her appearance, saying things like, "You'd be so much prettier if you lost a little weight." These words stung more than Clara would ever admit. They made her feel like she wasn't good enough, as though her worth was somehow tied to her size. But despite the hurt, Clara tried to ignore it, focusing instead on her dreams. One evening, while sitting at her small kitchen table, Clara was going through a stack of letters. Her parents had been encouraging her to settle down, to start a family, and to find someone who could help her and her family get ahead. Clara knew this was not what she wanted, but she didn't know how to escape it. One day, a letter from her aunt arrived. It was an invitation to become part of a mail-order bride service, something that was not uncommon in Eastern Europe. Clara's aunt had married a man from America through this service, and she was doing well. She had a life filled with opportunities that seemed impossible in their small village. Clara wasn't sure what to think at first. A mail-order bride? Was it even possible for someone like her, someone who didn't fit the perfect mold, to find love that way? The more she thought about it, though, the more she realized this could be her chance for something different. It could be a way out of the life she had always known. She dreamed of finding someone who could see her for who she truly was. Someone who would love her not because of how she looked, but for the person she was on the inside. With a mix of excitement and hesitation, Clara decided to sign up for the service. She sent in her application and began exchanging letters with several men who were interested in her. The men she communicated with were from all over the United States. Some were from big cities, while others lived in small towns just like hers. But as Clara corresponded with each man, she began to feel discouraged. It wasn't that the men were unkind, but they always found reasons not to meet her. Some said she was too big, or not quite what they were looking for, while others politely thanked her and moved on. It was as if her size, something that had always been a part of her, was the only thing that mattered. Each rejection was harder than the last. Clara felt like a failure. She had thought this could be her chance to find someone who would appreciate her, but instead it seemed that no one could look beyond her appearance. At first, Clara tried to hide her hurt. She continued to write back, smiling through her words even though the rejections were taking a toll on her. She had always been the one who told herself she didn't care what others thought, but the constant rejections, especially because of her size, made it hard to keep that mindset. How could she not care when it felt like her dreams were slipping away? The weight of disappointment hung over her like a dark cloud. Clara started to question herself. Was there something wrong with her? Why was she being judged based on her appearance instead of her heart? She had always been kind, caring, and hardworking. She knew she had so much love to give. But as the rejections piled up, she wondered if anyone would ever see past the outer layers to understand who she truly was. But Clara wasn't ready to give up just yet. She had always believed in the possibility of something better. She had seen other women in her community who had settled for what they thought was their only option. But Clara didn't want to live a life of regrets. She didn't want to give in to the pressure to accept less than what she deserved. So despite all the setbacks, Clara kept writing. She continued to put herself out there, hoping that somewhere someone would see her for the woman she was, not just for the way she looked. In the midst of all the heartache, Clara clung to one thing: hope. She believed that one day the right person would come along, someone who would appreciate her for everything she was. But as the weeks passed and more letters came, Clara started to feel the weight of rejection heavier than ever before. She had started to wonder if her dream was just that, a dream. Maybe she wasn't meant for a life of adventure and love. Maybe she would just have to accept the life that was handed to her, even if it wasn't what she had hoped for. And just as she was starting to give up hope, something changed. One afternoon, while Clara was sitting by the window, gazing out at the quiet street, she noticed a new letter in the pile. She opened it and her heart skipped a beat as she read the first few lines. This letter was different. It was not from a man who had rejected her based on her size. Instead, it was from a man who had taken the time to read her words, to understand her heart. His name was Eli, and he was a lumberjack living in a small town in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Eli's letter was warm, full of kindness and sincerity. He didn't judge Clara based on her appearance, and instead he spoke about his life, his love of nature, and his desire to find someone who would appreciate the simple things in life. His words were different from all the others, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the connection she had been waiting for. Maybe, just maybe, her dream was about to come true.